The city of New York never truly slept, but in the towering glass building of Crestwood Enterprises, the office was unusually quiet. The hum of computers and distant traffic below were the only sounds. Breaking the stillness, Jason sat at his desk, eyes glued to the screen, typing furiously to finish a report due at midnight. The office was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering occasionally, casting long shadows across the room. He thought he was alone, save for the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air and the soft rhythm of his own heartbeat. That's when he felt it, her presence. Victoria, the CEO of the company, appeared at the end of the room, her stilettos clicking softly against the polished hardwood floor. Even at this late hour, she was impeccable. Her tailored suit hugged her figure perfectly, her hair cascading in waves and her piercing eyes fixed on him. Jason tried to focus on the spreadsheet in front of him, but he couldn't not with her standing there, leaning casually against the desk. A faint smirk playing on her lips. "Jason," she said, her voice low, intimate, and strangely commanding. "Still working at this hour?" He cleared his throat, attempting professionalism. "Yes, ma'am. Just trying to get everything ready for tomorrow's board meeting." Victoria walked closer, and the scent of her perfume enveloped him, warm, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. "You work too hard," she murmured. Almost teasingly, her eyes sparkled with mischief. But there was something deeper there, something dangerous. "Maybe you need a break." Jason felt his chest tighten. There was always a magnetic tension around Victoria, an aura of authority mixed with allure. But tonight it felt amplified. She stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and his mind spun with conflicting thoughts. She was his boss. The professional boundaries were crystal clear, yet here she was standing inches from him, daring him to cross that invisible line. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Just for him, we'll sleep together tonight." Jason froze, the words echoed in his mind louder than the city outside. He swallowed hard, trying to rationalize this was insane. His career, his reputation. Everything could be jeopardized if he responded the wrong way. Yet the pull he felt was undeniable. Victoria leaned in closer, and he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering, hypnotic. He tried to look away, tried to summon the logic that had always guided him, but the moment stretched heavy with temptation and unspoken desire. Her smirk softened into something gentler, almost tender. "No need to resist," she whispered, her voice a silk thread that wrapped around his mind. Jason's fingers twitched over the keyboard, unsure whether to type or to reach out, to obey reason or succumb to the thrill of the unknown. In that quiet office high above the sleeping city, Jason realized that tonight would be nothing like any other night. He had known Jason's mind was a storm. As he followed Victoria out of the office, the corridors, usually familiar and sterile, now felt charged with electricity, as if the walls themselves were aware of the secret unfolding. The city below glittered like a sea of stars, yellow taxis and red tail lights, moving in patterns that seemed insignificant compared to the storm between them. Jason kept his hands clenched at his sides, trying to steady himself. But Victoria walked with a confidence that made hesitation almost impossible. "You're tense," she observed casually, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. "Relax, tonight isn't about work." He swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to preserve the professional distance he had spent months cultivating. Yet her presence was magnetic, intoxicating, and every rational thought dissolved under the weight of anticipation. Victoria's apartment, or rather, the luxury hotel she insisted on staying at after late meetings, was only a few blocks away. The ride was silent except for the hum of the car engine and the occasional faint honk from the streets. Jason's eyes kept darting toward her, trying to read her expression, trying to predict what would happen next. But Victoria was an enigma, and her unreadable smile only made him more unsettled. When they arrived, the doorman barely noticed them, accustomed to Victoria's late-night comings and goings. Jason's heartbeat thundered in his ears as she led him up the elevator, her hand brushing against his as she pressed the button for the top floor. The subtle contact sent a jolt through him, a reminder that boundaries were fragile. That desire could overpower logic in a heartbeat. The moment the door opened, Jason was struck by the elegance of the room. Dim lighting, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, and a subtle scent of vanilla in the air. But he hardly noticed the surroundings. All he saw was Victoria. She turned toward him, her eyes locked on his, her voice softer now, almost tender. "You've been so disciplined, so controlled," she murmured. "Tonight you don't have to be." Jason's pulse raced. The words, though simple, were loaded with implication. He could feel the tension building in the room, thick and almost tangible. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. He tried to look away, tried to remind himself of consequences, but his resolve crumbled under the intensity of her gaze. "Just trust me," she whispered, her breath warm against his cheek. The command wasn't forceful, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that made defiance nearly impossible. Jason's hands shook slightly, a mix of fear, anticipation, and undeniable attraction coursing through him. And in that suspended moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the room, the city lights below, and the electric tension that crackled between them. Tonight, nothing would be predictable, and every decision he made would pull him further, into a world he had only imagined from a distance. Jason realized he was no longer a bystander in his own life. He was standing at the edge of a choice that would change everything. The door closed behind them with a soft click, cutting them off from the world outside. The city's distant hum faded into insignificance as the hotel room became its own universe, a private world of dim light, soft shadows, and unspoken possibilities. Jason's pulse raced, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to step back, to maintain professionalism, but the magnetic pull of Victoria was impossible to resist. Victoria leaned against the edge of the desk, her silhouette outlined by the warm glow of the city lights, streaming through the floor to ceiling windows. "You've been holding yourself together all day," she murmured, her voice silky and low, almost a caress, "but tonight you can let go." Jason swallowed hard, aware of every detail. The curve of her smile, the subtle arch of her brow, the way her eyes seemed to pierce right through him. He tried to respond, to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He had always admired her from a distance, respected her authority, and now the boundary between respect and desire blurred, dissolving entirely. She stepped closer, and he could feel the heat radiating from her body. His breath caught as her hand brushed lightly against his arm, the touch sending an electric shock straight to his core. "Jason," she whispered, a note of command laced with tenderness. "Don't be afraid of this." The room was quiet except for their breathing, the soft hum of the air conditioning, and the faint jazz still playing in the background. Jason felt the tension coil tighter inside him, each heartbeat a drum of anticipation. Victoria moved around him slowly, every motion deliberate, sensual, and teasing. His mind spun with conflicting thoughts, ethics, career consequences, but the pull of desire was overwhelming. Victoria's lips were just a breath away from his ear as she murmured, "I want to see you as you really are, without the walls you put up." Her words were intoxicating. Disarming him completely, Jason's hands twitched at his sides, uncertain whether to reach out, whether to surrender, whether to cross that invisible line he had spent so long respecting. The tension built with every step she took, every glance, every brush of her fingers against his skin. He could feel his resolve weakening, his body responding in ways he had never anticipated. Victoria's presence was a force strong, confident and yet tender in a way that left him dizzy. Finally, she stepped close enough that he could see the depth in her eyes, the promise and the danger intertwined. "Tonight," she whispered, "we forget the world." Her words were a key unlocking every hesitation he had carried. Jason realized he was no longer just an observer in this story. He was a participant caught in a whirlwind of temptation and desire, unable and unwilling to resist, as Victoria reached for him. The world outside ceased to exist entirely. There was only this room, only this moment, and only the undeniable pull between them. Jason knew with both fear and anticipation that tonight would change everything. The night wrapped around them like a velvet curtain, sealing the hotel room in an intimate cocoon of shadows. And muted light outside, New York City pulsed with life. Unaware of the storm unfolding on the top floor, Jason's heartbeat was erratic, echoing in his chest as Victoria guided the rhythm of the room, her touch confident yet tender, her presence commanding yet comforting. Every hesitation he had felt earlier had dissolved, replaced by a heady mixture of desire, awe, and surrender. They moved together in a silent understanding, unspoken boundaries fading with each glance, each brush of skin. The tension that had built over months through stolen smiles, lingering looks, and subtle teasing erupted into something raw, tangible, and undeniable. Jason realized how much he had longed for this moment, even if he hadn't consciously admitted it. The intensity of Victoria's gaze, the warmth of her touch made everything else irrelevant. "I want you to feel safe," she murmured, her lips brushing against his ear, sending shivers down his spine. "Tonight there's only us." Jason nodded, words failing him entirely. All the rational thinking, all the rules he had followed seemed meaningless in her presence. He responded instinctively, letting the night unfold without fear, without hesitation, surrendering fully to the connection. that had been simmering between them for so long. Time seemed to stretch minutes, melting into hours. As they explored the closeness that had been denied for so long, the city below was a distant hum. The only reality was the space between them, the shared breaths, the electric pull that tied them together. Every touch, every whispered word drew them closer, weaving a tapestry of desire, trust, and unspoken promises. Victoria's eyes softened at moments, revealing vulnerability. Beneath the commanding exterior Jason had always admired, he realized that this side of her, the intimate, tender, human side, was something she shared only with him. In return, he let her see his own walls crumble, his own fears dissolve, leaving only raw honesty between them. By the first light of dawn, the room held the quiet aftermath of passion. A soft blanket tossed aside, subtle traces of closeness lingering in the sheets. The scent of perfume mingled with their shared warmth. Jason lay back, his chest still rising and falling rapidly, and looked at Victoria with a mixture of awe, tenderness, and uncertainty. "I didn't expect," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, but she silenced him with a gentle touch to his lips. "Shh," she said softly. "No expectations, just us." Jason nodded, understanding that something fundamental had shifted tonight, had crossed boundaries, rewritten rules, and yet created a connection deeper than either of them could have anticipated. There was fear, yes, but also an undeniable bond, a shared secret that would linger in their hearts and minds. Far beyond this night, Victoria leaned back, her head resting lightly on his shoulder, and for the first time Jason allowed himself to breathe freely, to exist fully in this moment. The world outside might continue as it always had, but inside this room everything had changed. And as the first sunrise touched the skyline, Jason realized that life and desire would never be the same again.